Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome back. Another episode of the NewOrleans.Football podcast. We got a bunch of topics for you guys today. We're going to talk about whether or not Dennis Allen's seat's hot, what the team's identity is. Will they keep fighting? Where do they go from here? Is the season over after the loss to Pittsburgh? We're going to dive into all this stuff and much, much more. And as always, we're coming to you from the Better Call BADEAUX podcast studio. And if you need legal help with any of the following: car wrecks, offshore injuries, 18-wheeler collisions, Maritime and Jones Act, hurricane and storm claims, you better call BADEAUX at 504-323-7777 or 985-303-7777 for your free consultation and case review, BADEAUXlaw.com. And check out our friends on Veterans Boulevard, Firehouse Subs. We have an event coming up with them during the bye week. Stay tuned for more details. It's going to be a giveaway and some stuff going on up there, so make sure you come by during that week. Another episode of the show. Let's go. Hey, what's up, everyone? We're still here. We're still playing hard. We're still showing up when we're supposed to show up and doing the things that we're supposed to do. So we're going to tackle this show and get through these topics. I'm Nick here with Mike. How you feeling about the season right now, man? Let's just right off the bat, is the season over?
Time of death, September 13th or November 13th in Pittsburgh. I mean, yeah, there's ways that they can rally back. And I mean, it was, what was it? 15 days ago that they beat the Raiders 24-0 and showed the best football they played all season. So maybe that team is still in there somewhere, but that was a new low for me in Pittsburgh. And then when you add Pittsburgh and Baltimore together, like even when they were losing to Cincinnati and Arizona, they were sloppy losses that included highs and lows. This was just a flat line. I mean, this Pittsburgh one was a new level of low, and you combine that with the fact that Tampa Bay has finally gotten its act together. I feel like they're just playing. I really feel like they're playing out the string, and the question is, how aggressively do they play out the string? But I don't see what the end game is here, other than do they win 6 or 7 games? Do they have anything positive to point to at the end of the season? But I don't think they're playing for. I don't think we're going to talk about playoffs again this season.
Yeah. Teron was tweeting the other day that their season's still alive and everything. I messaged him. I was like, man, God sees you lying. You can't say this stuff anymore, because it really is. Mathematically, they're still alive, but practically there's nothing there. I mean, this is probably it. And I mean, they're kind of fighting now for what does the future hold, and are they fighting? I mean, that's going to be kind of the big question that we're watching for over the next several weeks. Are they fighting, or are they giving into this? And I think that's the stuff that's going to determine Dennis Allen's future, what they do with this roster. I think all of that is now what you're watching for over the next 7 weeks. And it's going to be a long and grueling 7 weeks, and it could get really bad really fast. I mean, they are playing a struggling Rams team, but there are still going to be a ton of injuries. And I don't think that we're going to see maybe anybody back on the offensive line, maybe James Hurst, but it looks
maybe
like
Andrus Peat, maybe James Hurst. Yeah.
But still, I mean, you got replacement players there. You got injuries on the defense. Maybe Marcus May comes back. I don't know. I mean, it's going to be
Marcus Davenport should maybe come back.
It's going to be tough, though. I mean, and they're down guys. They don't have the players they need. It could spiral very, very quickly, and this thing could be extremely out of control really, really fast. I hate to talk about like effort and how hard people are playing, because sometimes it's hard
I
to
think
know,
the Pittsburgh game is the first time these questions are fair game, and we're leading the show with them. I mean, like I said, I was probably higher on all of those: energy, effort, fight, creative game plans. I think we still saw all that stuff, even when they were losing to Cincinnati and Arizona, especially early in the games. We didn't see any of that. We didn't see creative game plans. We didn't see adjustments. We didn't see good answers. We didn't see energy. We didn't see effort. I thought as much as missed tackles have been the theme of the 2022 season, this one felt like the worst. I mean, there weren't guys flying to the ball. It was their highest total of the season, but not only that, it was, I mean, I'm thinking of one play, but I feel like I saw it several times where it was like, the second and third guy just didn't even bother coming over to help.
Yeah, Alontae Taylor missed a couple. Nobody was there. Demario Davis missed an open field one. Nobody was there. The one where everybody was there, 2 guys didn't try. Alontae Taylor over pursued it after PJ Williams missed a tackle. Watching the game back, I don't know if Tyron had a shot at that or not. I don't know if Alontae's actions caused him to pause because he over pursued the play, and then it was kind of like would it have created a collision, but optically it didn't look good. And we're at a place where optics are really kind of everything right now on a lot of this stuff happening on the field. But I agree with you. I feel like when they played Cincinnati, there was like a palpable presence to everybody, that energy, and they came out and it was like, oh, they're going to win this game. And obviously they didn't, but the way they came out in it kind of stood out. And then Arizona, I kind of had some questions like, man, how are they going to respond to this? It's a short week. What's it going to look like? And they came out and it was like, bang, right away. And then Andy Dalton threw 3 interceptions and, the
wheels came
died
off a little bit, but that was bad execution and a bad team. And of course they were covering DeAndre Hopkins with their C squad and everything like that. And they just didn't have the horses in that game. Pittsburgh, they didn't have the horses, but I felt like they went into it defeated. Like, they had no hands. I mean, it's the first time we've been on this offensive game plan all year. Like, why didn't they use Taysom more? Why didn't they use Shaheed more? But this was more of a like I didn't even come into that game saying, why didn't you do this more? I was just like, oh, so just nothing worked and that was it.
It was like as soon as they got behind, you text me and you're like, hey, I'm thinking about like writing this. And it was like early in the game and it was like, yeah, all right.
Because like by 1 score to Pittsburgh.
Yeah, and it felt like it was over.
Like, well, it's
over.
It
was like they can't come back from this. And it almost feels like they play like that. The biggest mystery of this season to me is, and I'm sure if we went through and looked at this, like it's not exact, but it does feel like as soon as they get behind in a game, like Taysom Hill's done. Like he might as well take off his helmet, hang up his cleats because they don't know how to get him on the field in those situations. And it just kind of feels like the same thing. It's just like they get behind and then it's just like, well, what are we going to do? And it's just, you got to do something. You can't just do this because it does feel like they can't come back from anything. And it will be interesting to see.
Although their 2-minute offense keeps working. I mean, Juwan Johnson, if they just play 2-minute offense for the rest of the season, Juwan Johnson's going to be first team all pro. It was funny. He finally caught a touchdown pass that wasn't in the fourth quarter playing catch up, but it was during the 2-minute drill.
Yeah.
He had 5 catches in this game. 3 of them were during that 2-minute drill before halftime. The one time they showed any semblance of life.
So do you think, how hot is DAC?
He's not going to get fired during the season. And it's funny. I actually looked this up because I wrote it would. I think I wrote Sunday. It would probably be the earliest anyone's ever been fired in like sports history. And actually, the last time a NFL coach was fired 10 games or less into a season was 44 years ago. So everybody who's out there being like, he's got to go. Well, you're reaching a conclusion that no NFL team has reached in 50 years practically. Now, there are a couple coaches who got let go after 13 games. Urban Meyer, and last year, with scandals and circuses, and we're nowhere near that yet. And Bobby Petrino was another one. He was angling for a college job, and they said, "Get the hell out of here!" But that doesn't happen. Guys don't get fired during their first NFL season, so he's not getting fired during the season. But you're right. It's 7 games left. It's 8 weeks left, and he's going to have to show that he can handle a team that's giving up, or stave off a team giving up. That he can make some adjustments, that he can find some solutions, that he can motivate some guys when times are tough for motivation. He's going to have to show things that they think they can build on. Otherwise, they're absolutely going to have the conversation after just one season.
Yeah. I tweeted this yesterday. I do think like there's the petition and everybody's mad and they want him gone. Like today, they want to open up Twitter and see that tweet right now. I think if you fired him right now, and I made a case before about like you'd never hire anybody good. If you fired him today when they are down 11 or 12 key players, your next guy that you're interviewing is looking at the situation. They're going, you don't have a first round pick. You don't have any cap space. You just fired the last head coach after 10 games. Plus he was down 11 or 12 starters. Yeah. Why would I take your job?
Yeah.
The only person
if you're going to, like anyone else would say, oh, so you're going to blame the coach for injuries. Like, on the outside looking
if you have 2 options and you can go to the team that didn't fire the guy the day after 11 key players are out. Yeah. I mean, you're taking the other job. So you aren't hiring anybody with the options. And the next coach, if they do this, they need to go through an actual job interview process, be open-minded about it. And I'm not saying they weren't, but it seemed like they had a front runner, someone that they wanted to somebody needed to convince them to go another direction. I think just from the outside looking in, that would be my perception of it. That I think they thought DA was the guy, and they interviewed everybody, and it was like, you got to beat him this time. It needs to be open-minded, and hopefully whoever you're trying to hire is good enough that another organization wants him as well, and you can convince them to come here. So doing it right now, no, but I think that it's definitely something end of the season on the table for sure, depending on how this stuff plays out. And I think that there's maybe some signs that it could go either way at this point. I mean, just being realistic about it, I think that you kind of got to watch how everybody's communicating, how they're talking. One of the team captains being convinced that there was dishonesty about his injury situation, I think is a very bad look. I mean, that guy's got a C on his chest, and I think he handled it with as much decorum as possible. But his truth is that the way this was talked about isn't what it was. And I think other people see that happen too. So, I mean, I don't think that's a good thing. And, yeah, honestly, like I didn't necessarily like after the game where DA said it's on our leaders to pull us out of this. No, dude, they got to lean on you to pull them out of this. If you're leaning on them to help you, that's fine. But the public message can't be our players have to pull us out of this.
Right.
The head coach needs to reach in there and pull them out of this. And if you have everybody on board with you to do that, that's fine. But the public messaging can't be this is on Demario Davis and Cam Jordan and Alvin Kamara, and it's on Dennis Allen. You gotta pull him out of this.
Well, look, and I think he's going to struggle to do that because buy-in and confidence are everything in the NFL. And Sean Payton, look, I've made this point before. I don't think Sean Payton would be having a good year this year. I really don't. I think this team might be 3-7 with Sean Payton as coach, maybe 4-6. There's some things you just can't coach your way out of. Like we think they've made really bad personnel decisions that have backfired throughout this offseason. Maybe Sean Payton doesn't get rid of CJ Gardner-Johnson. Maybe Sean Payton doesn't get rid of Marcus Williams. So in that standpoint, maybe things would be different with Sean Payton. But they've made bad personnel decisions. The injuries have been rough. Like I said, it feels like last year all over again, and Sean Payton lost 5 straight games.
I'm giving him one more win just on the merit of passing on 2nd and 10.
Yeah. But and 14, 15, and 16. Like I looked this up the other day. He lost 5 out of 6 games once in that stretch. I mean, they had seasons where they were not 3-7, but they were 4-8 a couple of times. Like even Sean Payton was susceptible to everything that's happening right now. And guys were fighting each other in the locker room even during those years. Bad things happen when things go bad. Like they've started 0-4 and 0-3 a couple times under Sean Payton, and it felt like a train wreck. And they mutinied on defensive coordinators before who had to get fired midseason. But that's the problem is when things get to this level, stuff goes down. Like, players don't buy in as much. Players don't have the same energy. There's more finger pointing, and there's way less buy-in, and there's way less confidence. And when you're Dennis Allen, who has no skins on the wall, as opposed to someone like Sean Payton, who could have been like, we can get through this. This has happened before, and we've come out of it before. It's going to be really, really hard for Dennis Allen to find any buy-in from this team. I was looking this up, and somebody pulled my phone out, though. To your point about firing someone after 1 year. So I looked at the list of all the one-and-done coaches, and it's like 16 of them over the last 30 years or whatever it is. And there's one team that comes up here a few times. Raiders, Joe Bugle. Raiders, Hugh Jackson. Raiders, Art Shell. So the Raiders are on there 3 times. And what do we know about the Raiders? Everyone considers them a joke. Sean Payton turned down the chance to be the Raiders head coach when he was a young up-and-coming coach because everyone advised him, stay away from that organization. Dennis Allen, to this day, and the Saints hired Dennis Allen because they say, we don't consider him failing with the Raiders to be a black mark on his resume because everyone fails with that sinking ship organization. So that's the reputation the Raiders earned when they 3 times fired coaches after 1 season. So you are playing with fire if you do this. That would be a last resort decision for the Saints. But I made this point a week ago with you and Kevin. Dennis Allen was the choice for a team that was heading a certain direction. It was a choice to keep Dennis Allen, but it was also a choice to keep Dennis Allen, Ryan Nielsen, Chris Richard, Michael Hodges, Pete Carmichael, and 90% of this roster. That's the decision the Saints made. And Dennis Allen felt like the right choice for that overall decision. I think that is what's at stake is Dennis Allen, but also direction of this team.
I do think that there are some circumstances here that have led, as you said, to some of this downfall. I think that there'd still be downfall in general, that you're still missing tackles this late in the season. That's coaching. And you're still having false starts this late in the season. That's coaching. So I think there's a lot of stuff there that's bad. I do think that if you were a healthy team, maybe you'd have a win or two more, and maybe some of that would be mass, and it wouldn't be as blatant at this point. But I do think that there is an element of it not being good enough. And I've kind of been auditing in hindsight, kind of the thought process throughout the offseason and what I thought of what they were doing throughout it. I mean, look, my ass is out there. Like I look bad on this one because I honestly thought that, yeah, preserve the culture, have DA coach the defense, have Pete coach the offense. Why wouldn't that work? Because it's worked for so long. Obviously, that was the wrong analysis. The team obviously got that super wrong, and that isn't what they should have done. They should have done something different, clearly. And in looking through that, I kind of wonder, like, if some of the warning flags that were there got overlooked, like the fact that you picked two coordinators instead of one. Is that a thing that should have stood out? Is a red flag? Is it actually a red flag, or is it now just a perceived red flag? Pete Carmichael not immediately becoming the offensive coordinator, and again, I think that was actually more because they were looking for a process, and I think maybe some of the people they wanted weren't available, and they ended up going back to Carmichael. I don't think it was necessarily as it was laid out in the public, maybe a little bit, but I think there's a little bit more to that story than has been out there, just based on some of the stuff that I've heard over the last few months. But was that a red flag? And then maybe should you've done something else if there was hesitation, plus you were looking for someone, and I don't know, maybe you do that process over. Just some of these decisions in hindsight, you look at them and you say, man, like, was this coming? And should I have seen it coming? And I think maybe so. I mean, I still think that, the one thing that looks different in practice, and this might be a BS criticism, and everything's on the table for speculation when things are going this way. When we used to go to practice, Sean was running the offense. Every single time Sean was running the offense, you heard Sean's voice. He was running the offense. He was telling people what they were doing wrong. He's telling them that their splits 3 yards or 3 inches off, and he was involved in every single detail. And he was on that side of the field. I think maybe in 14 and 15 there was a little bit more looking down at the other end than there was in the later years. But that was his offense. He was the offensive coach. He was running it. DA was running the defense. When we go out to practice now, like, it's not like that. Like, he doesn't have his sleeves rolled up on the defense. He's still around, but he's on the offensive side of the field. He's with special teams. He's doing a bunch of different stuff. Does that matter, or am I reaching? Like, I
don't know. Yeah. I mean, there's no way we can know for sure, but I know DA doesn't have the answer. And that's the thing is it injuries? Is it personnel decisions, or is it coaching? Well, the answer is it's all of it.
Yeah.
Like, DA could have survived the season. DA was not necessarily the wrong choice, but none of us ever, like, we knew this was a crossroads offseason. This was like should they rebuild? A lot of national analysts looked at the team back in January, and they were like, oh, look at their salary cap situation and their older players. This team should rebuild. But we were like, yeah, but then you're kind of wasting the primes of Alvin Kamara and Marshawn Lattimore and Cam Jordan and Demario Davis and Michael Thomas. This team just went 9-8 last year. If they're healthier this year, they could go 10-7. None of us thought, no, this team's supposed to go to the Super Bowl. Well, some people did predict them to go to the Super Bowl. I never agreed with that. But I think we agreed that they were on the verge. They were like two paths you could go.
I didn't think they could be worse. I thought they'd get healthy.
I thought they'd get healthier and get better. But it does not surprise me that they were on the verge. I mean, we knew their talent. We knew they had less talent going into this year than they had last year because they let Teron Armstead and Marcus Williams go, two guys who were ranked as like top 10 free agents in the entire NFL. But we thought the health would make up for that. We knew they had big question marks at quarterback. I mean, they didn't even want Jameis Winston and Andy Dalton. They tried to upgrade to Deshaun Watson. So we knew, like, it's not like they've taken this beautiful 12-win team and turned it into a disaster. We knew it was right on the edge, and they needed injury luck, and they needed things to go their way, and they needed to get a little more out of the quarterback position they did. But what we do know is that if the bottom did drop out on all that, and if things got really hard, well, then they don't have the right coaching staff for that situation. It's clear that they don't have the answers for how to revive a sinking ship. I mean, that isn't why they didn't choose Dennis Allen, because they thought, well, if the ship starts sinking, he's the proven guy to get us out of it. They just were hoping that wasn't going to be what this season turned into. But no, he definitely does not seem like the guy who has the answers for this scenario.
Yeah. The other criticism on DA too is that this wasn't a broken ship, right? You
Right.
come in, you can't bottom out. You were here to put this team in the playoffs, and that's what you're judged upon. So a 6-win season for somebody else that's a new head coach, that doesn't hit the same way here.
Yeah, you're right.
If you miss the playoffs, you have failed. You were here to keep this going, to make it be seamless, because you apparently proved yourself to people behind the scenes that you were worthy of a next shot. And look, honestly, DA and Josh McDaniels are going to make it really hard for anyone to get a job as a retread after this season.
Yeah,
like both these guys
not a great look for a second time.
The first
it was already hard enough.
The first impression was the real impression. So it's going to be really hard.
Matt Nagy's out there being like, damn it. Well, I guess I'm just going to be a coordinator the rest of my career.
Speaking of the Raiders too, I mean, look, they're a team that's kind of in that perpetual rebuild. And I think as you come into the crossroads this offseason, next offseason, a lot of stuff's going to be on the table. Do you rebuild? Do you reload? Do you try to keep going? Do you get a quarterback and plug them in and try to stay competitive in the NFC South? The Raiders are a good example of one of those teams like you can kind of just get stuck and there's maybe a high here, but you always end up back at a low. I think personally it's a little bit dangerous. I know everybody's kind of screaming rebuild, rebuild, rebuild. I would warn those people. I bet they were the same people that were saying, I'm ready for something else. I can't wait for Sean and Drew to move on.
Well, there were people who wanted Drew gone the last 5 years of his career. Yeah,
I just want to watch somebody else.
Those people have deleted they've gone into their Twitter feeds and they're like, when I used to be like, I'm ready to move on from Drew, and it was like 2017. They're like, I'm sorry I ever tweeted that.
Yeah, absolutely. But look, I think some of those teams, I think it's a dangerous game to play, to try to peel everything back and go down to the studs. I think that there's a real danger when you stop trying to compete to being able to find your way back to being a competitive organization again. So I think
I'm going to be even bleaker than you. So that's a bleak outlook that you just gave. I think it's unavoidable no matter what approach you take. Like, this is the new reality of the Saints. Like, they don't have Sean Payton, who was the best head coach in franchise history anymore. They don't have Drew Brees, who was the best quarterback in franchise history anymore. And you can't just find either one. I mean,
sure, but
all these teams you're talking about go through 12 different head coaches and go through 12 different quarterbacks. No matter what approach you take, you're not going to find a Hall of Fame coach and you're not going to find a Hall of Fame quarterback. So there's no blueprint that gets you to that.
But I'm saying walking into it willingly. No, but saying I'm gonna get rid of everything. I'm selling everything. We're gonna have the Macy's closeout sale or the Sears closeout sale, and then we're boarding up the doors and we're gonna try to build a new business here afterwards. I think that you can keep trying to compete and you keep trying to add pieces and you keep trying to aim for the playoffs because I think it's important to maintain a culture in your building. And if the players in your building know that you aren't trying to make the playoffs, they probably aren't going to play hard. Your rookies probably aren't going to come in and develop. I think that you still have to try to stay on the treadmill. I don't think you can stand off to the side and just let the wheels spin while everything flies off into the wall and you're starting over from nothing. I think you have to maintain a certain level of all right, we're going for it. Otherwise, you become the Jags or you become the Lions or you become the Browns or you become Houston. Like, who in Houston doesn't ever have, well, they got a good rookie this year, but Houston doesn't develop a lot of players because it's just such a toxic atmosphere. And when you're in a building where there's nothing to exist for except the paycheck, I think that's where you end up with a bad locker room and things don't happen as they should.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess the whether they tear it down to the studs argument or not is the other thing that's made the Saints special is they've had, so we use these top 100 lists. The NFL Network has one, ESPN has one, CBS has one, or whatever. There's some teams that have 0 players on those top 100 lists. The Saints, for several years, had 7 guys on it.
Yep.
They had Teron Armstead on it. They had Ryan Ramczyk on it. They had Alvin on it. They had Michael Thomas on it. They had Cam Jordan on it. They had DeMario Davis on it. They had Marshawn on it. They had Drew on it. So that's 8 different guys over that span that have made appearances on the. And that's why I've sort of argued for keep competing with this squad. Don't purposely start over. And but they're going to be down to 3 names on that list next year. And in a couple of years, they might be down to 2 names on that list next year. So if you're rebuilding around the current roster, what are you rebuilding around? So I don't think there's a clear path that says don't throw this team out yet. Don't be in a rush to throw this team out yet. Well, they better have the talent that you're building around if you're not tearing it down to the studs.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair, but what is tearing it down to the studs like? Right. I think we kind of touched on this last week even, but Are you trading Marshawn?
I'm not. No, I'm. This is what I said. And I'm not the tear it down to the studs guy. Although if I'm looking at this from a fan perspective, at least it would give me a direct. Like I said, I'm almost more interested in
The
what
direction's
Carolina's
just down though.
I'm almost more interested in what Carolina's doing right now. I'm almost more interested in what the Texans are doing right now with all those draft picks they got from the Deshaun Watson trade and the fact that they're going to have the number 1 pick again this year. At least from a fan interest level, there's something there. I mean, I'm a Cubs fan, and for them to finally win the only World Series they've ever won, they did it by spending a couple of years of saying, we're actually going to spend absolutely no money and just rebuild the farm system from scratch. Baseball is a little different because it is a farm system philosophy there. They lost 100 games. They won a World Series. Like, there is some appeal to that approach. But I think the in-between approach for me that I take of the Saints is, I don't, if you could be part of 2024, of course you can stay on the team. And that could be Alvin, and that could be, that's definitely Marshawn, and it probably could be Cam Jordan or Demario Davis. Those are tougher decisions. But what I'm not doing is signing guys to 1 year, $12 million contracts. I'm not signing this year's version of Tyrann Mathieu and Jarvis Landry to try to make next year's team a little better. I'm not trading a future first-round pick to try to win now
but that's
instead
not tearing
of win
it
later.
down. Like, the tearing it down to the studs.
So yeah, I'm not tearing it down to the studs, but I think I'm re-upping, saving up all the future investments that I can. And yeah, I am looking to trade some players. I don't think
the tear it down and rebuild thing actually exists. I've never seen it. I don't think it happens very often.
It doesn't really happen.
I think you have to get lucky. I mean, the teams that have torn it down, they just stay torn down. The Lions have stayed torn down. Houston has stayed torn down. Miami finally just got back. It took the Bills 20 years to be a competitive team because they hit on one draft pick.
Here's the example that everyone around here that people want to see what just happened with the Bengals. That's what people want to see.
It took them 15 years between Carson Palmer and Joe Burrow. So you have to get lucky one time. And the thing is that
no, but what I'm saying is what the Saints are right now is the Andy Dalton-led Bengals that went to the playoffs and finished 8-8 every year with Marvin Lewis and Andy Dalton. And they finally,
but you can be the Eagles too and be that, and then you finally hit and you become the other side. I think if you stay on it and you keep going, the Andy Dalton-led Bengals got ripped apart and they were trash, and then it took them forever to get back. But the draft is such a crapshoot that it's not like, okay, we're going to pick well every single year. You're lucky if you get 2 good guys, and then, okay, 4 years go by and now you've drafted 8 good players. The first 2 are gone, so now you're down to 6. You're trying to hit again here. You aren't signing any free agents because your team sucks and nobody wants to go play there, and you have this toxic environment. So then you just stay trapped in hell. It's not even purgatory. Like, there's Jets fans that are just like, man, thank God they have a decent team this year. Like the guy that cuts hair at my barbershop, the other dude there, is just smiling every day because they finally have a decent team. And it's just like, they aren't actually good. Like, have you actually looked at the quarterback stats and all that? Like, they aren't a team with real hope, but it's just like, man, they're relevant and he's just flying high. Like, you get stuck in this spot where it can be really, really bleak for a long time. And like, granted, Miami's coming out of it now, but how long did it take them? I mean, their last relevant year was like the Wildcat year. I mean, it goes very long stretches, and the Bills had a million bad draft picks until they got Josh Allen. So unless you draft Josh Allen and people are like, oh, I want to go play there, and you also have an offensive coordinator who looks like he might be one of the best head coaches in the league right now in New York, a lot has to go right to get out of that once you just succumb to it. So I've just seen more teams stay they float water, they stay good. Like, I think San Fran's a good example of that too. Like, they always just kind of remain just at that 500 level. And then a few things go right and you're in the mix. A few things go wrong and you drop a few games below, but it's not that hard to get back to the middle level. If you're willing to drop down to being a 2-win team and you do it to yourself, man, you might as well just put the bullet in your head, because like you're not going to find a way back. It just doesn't happen in this way where it's like, well, let's just dip down temporarily to come back. Like, it's never temporary. Like, if you go to hell, you're staying in hell.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely possible. I'm looking at it more short term. What's the best path back to relevance? And so when I say what the Andy Dalton Bengals did, instead of being 8-8 every year, they got the number 1 pick, they drafted Joe Burrow, and then they go to the Super Bowl. That's the dream scenarios. How do we go from being this 7-win team to a Super Bowl?
Most teams don't draft Burrow, though. Most teams end up drafting a quarterback that isn't actually good. And they're looking for a new guy in a couple of years. Like, even with those early picks. Okay,
Yeah.
we got the first pick. All right, congratulations, you just took Sam Darnold. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
no, you're right.
that happens more often than the Joe
But
Burrow.
it goes back
like.
to what I said, which is my bleak outlook is there's no easy answer for this, period. There's no easy answer for this, period. And it's going to be get the next quarterback. I mean,
Yeah,
it matters. I think quarterback matters even more than coach. I really do.
So do
They
I.
both matter. But so the number one thing, the number one screw up that they already made and the one they can't make again is draft resources, because I think that's going to be the path to now. I did like the idea of, okay, you don't have to get your quarterback through the draft when they had all this talent on the roster and the quarterback was the one missing piece. But we're running a little low on time to where the quarterback is the one missing piece, and pretty soon there's going to be a lot.
They got
of
one more
missing
year of
pieces
that.
on this.
They got
team.
one more year of that. Yeah, if they want to try one more time, they got one more year of. Look, I've said this a million times. I do believe this is a better team than the record shows. I think there's too much talent here, and I think. Look, if we're going to go back to the criticism,
I think even with Dennis Allen at head coach, if this team is medium level injury, they're 5-5 right now.
Probably. Yeah, maybe so. And I also think medium level injury, if they're coached a little bit differently, I think it's an even better record. I mean, they aren't getting everything out of their talent. I think criticisms of the play calling is founded. One of the things they did, they get Tyrann Mathieu, and now he's playing in the box trying to tackle dudes, and he's 5'9". I mean, you traded Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. Now he's playing in a position where maybe he shouldn't be playing, and he looks bad. I mean, I think there's just a lot of resources out of position. I think some of the play callings where I've been on the 2nd and 10 runs the whole season. I mean, there was just a study I saw yesterday that the expected points per play on those is like garbage. And the Saints are the 3rd worst team in the league in terms of their play calling on it, expected points added per play on 2nd down and 10. And they're that bad. You know who's tops in the league? Miami. And they have a forward-thinking head coach, and they're winning a lot of games right now. So, I mean, I think all that stuff kind of goes hand in hand right now. And I just think that some of the identity, again, not being able to play Taysom Hill when you lose a lead is the weirdest thing going with this team. Like, you should find a way to get him on the field. I understand he's not maybe necessarily a 2-minute drill option, but there's a lot of plays outside of the 2-minute drill where you have been trailing where he hasn't been on the field. I mean, there was a 3rd down last week where Adam Prentice is on the field, split out wide, and Alvin Kamara is on the bench. Why is that happening? I don't understand all these things. And again, there's probably instances of that stuff happening when Sean Payton was that coach. But when you're succeeding, you aren't counting Adam Prentice and seeing where he's lined up at. You're just seeing what's going right. And you get opened up to a lot of criticism when things are going the wrong way. And some of it's fair, some of it's not. But everything just looks weird right now.
Well, there is no question. We talked about this a lot. The direction this offense decided to go, and I don't know if it's solely because Pete Carmichael decided this, or if it's because Dennis Allen, a defensive-minded head coach, decided this is the offense he wants to run. But they wanted to be the Tennessee Titans. They wanted to be the Pittsburgh Steelers. They wanted to be a run first, wear you out with the run game. We even heard Dennis Allen describe it from what just happened. Pittsburgh just ran for 217 yards. And I said, what's happened to your run defense? The Saints used to have the number 1 run defense in the league. And his first answer was, first of all, there's an element to the run game that is run, 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 and then you pop one where you just have to stick with it. And so in these games where we're losing and we're letting teams run the ball 40 times against us, they're going to hit. And that's what the Saints want to be on offense. That's how they believe. They didn't used to be that way. They used to be the pass heaviest offense in the league, and everybody used to yell, why don't they run it more? If you run the ball 30 times, you win games. They wanted to be if you run the ball 30 times, you win games. And when they were having some brief success in the middle of the season, it was because that was working. And they are stubbornly trying to stick with that, and certainly does not work when you're missing 3 offensive linemen. But that's what they decided they want to be on offense, probably because they don't have a top 25 quarterback situation in the NFL, as we reviewed last week when we were being like, all right, who has a worse quarterback situation than the Saints? They wanted to rely on their run game and their offensive line. And when that's not working, they're out of answers.
Yeah. I mean, I think at some point you got to just maybe try to go to some passes in the flat when you're starting 3 backup guys on the offensive line. There's something that allows you to get the ball out quickly and away from the weakest area on your team. Something's got to change. Alvin's number of touches in this game is crazy. It's unforgivable. And that's not the quarterback. That's the play calling. You got to do something to get him involved. Let them miss some tackles. Just lean on your playmaker somehow. And they didn't find the way to do that. speaking of last week's game, it seems like maybe possibly Jameis Winston's starting this week, or Dennis Allen's at least thinking about going back to him. Just kind of what are the thoughts on that?
Jameis is interesting. We haven't really done, I mean, we did the members only pod, but it was right after the game. So we haven't really done a pod since I talked to Jameis last week. And I think there were two different controversies that came out of my conversation with Jameis. One is, I think a lot of people pounced on his last answer in that Q&A, which was, if they said I'm 100% healthy, that's not the truth. And they, all took that as he's calling them a liar. Well, they never said he was 100% healthy. They said he's healthy. That could mean a lot of different things, but what it does mean is he's not on the injury report anymore, and he's active for every single game. And if Andy Dalton had gotten the flu, or what did Minka Fitzpatrick get that knocked him out of the game? Like, Jameis Winston was going to start and play that entire game. So Jameis Winston is healthy enough to play. But no, he's not 100% healthy. And so I don't think the Saints have ever disagreed with Jameis on the fact that he's 100% healthy versus he's just healthy enough to play. But the other thing was that Jameis said, he asked them, wait a minute now, if I sit, like in London, if I sit back and give my starting job back to Andy Dalton and things start going well, am I going to lose my job permanently? And he said he was told that won't happen. And he goes, but that's what's happened. So that one, I think, is a little more of a controversy than the first one. But anyway, I think they do have to determine whether Jameis Winston is healthy enough to start again, especially behind this offensive line. But if Jameis Winston is healthy enough to play, then theoretically the only thing that was keeping him off the field was Dennis Allen's belief that the offense was doing well with Andy Dalton at quarterback. And Allen flat out said it. The offense isn't doing well anymore. So there is no reason Jameis Winston is not going to be in a good position to succeed, because he's kind of hurt and the offensive line is kind of hurt and the offense is going nowhere right now. But he's the starter and Andy Dalton is the backup, and Andy Dalton is not outplaying him anymore. So it's Jameis Winston's job. Like, he's not the answer, but it's time to give the man his job back, I think,
Yeah. If I was Jameis, though, like, honestly, I'd
be like,
yeah, oh, now you want me out there behind the JV offensive line because your job's in trouble? No, I'm good. Like, that's honestly, but he can't do that. I think he has to go play, and he wants to play. And I mean, I think it's time for him. Going back to the last answer in your interview, I think my read of it from Jameis, and just my interpretation of it, playing devil's advocate, if I'm Jameis, I kind of felt like maybe what he was saying was, if they said I was healthy, like, I'm not. And I think his point of that wasn't about the 100% or anything like that. I think it was like, no, I don't want to be branded as the guy who got benched for Andy Dalton. And I think that was what he felt about that. And he was like, hey, look, they said I was, again, he didn't say it, but my interpretation was him being like, hey, look, if they said I was benched for performance reasons, that's not 100% fair because I wasn't healthy. And I think that's kind of his pushback against that.
They did. And he's upset about that. Now that's totally fair game.
And I think what he's saying, though, is that it wasn't fair for it to be presented like that. And it's probably true. It probably
is true. Dennis Allen benched Jameis Winston because he thought Andy Dalton was playing better.
I think where the point of contention comes from, though, if you are Jameis Winston, and I'm not arguing with you here, like I saw it the same way. That's what he said. That was his choice. And whether he was right or wrong about that, I mean, the results kind of say it wasn't great. But there wasn't a healthy Jameis behind door number B anyhow to go back to. But that's neither here nor there. I just think that from his point of view, he was just saying this isn't fair for them to put it like this because he said I'm healthy and I'm not. So I'm not playing because I'm not healthy, I think. But if he was healthy, DA kind of made it seem like, so,
Well,
whatever.
What I'm saying is DA did make that decision. Now, it could be the wrong decision, but like we were asking Dennis Allen, so when Jameis gets back to a certain level of health, does he get his job back? And Dennis Allen was like, Jameis has already gotten back to that level to where it's time to make a decision. Like, Drew Brees got cleared to come back from his rib injury. Like, Taysom Hill got cleared to come back from his, mallet finger injury or whatever. He is now healthy enough to go back to the role, and I am choosing Andy Dalton for performance reasons. Dennis Allen made that clear that he was making a performance decision and not a health decision. But that did not mean that Dennis Allen was saying, no, Jameis is 100% healthy. He was just saying, that's not why I'm making this decision.
Yeah, and he didn't need to do that.
But
and
now
Jameis said
if it's a performance decision, you can't go with Andy Dalton anymore because he's not outperforming.
And he didn't even need to do that. Jameis
said
said he just started doing bootlegs and stuff last week in your story. So, I mean, like, he didn't need to make that decision. He didn't need to tie himself to it. And it probably, the perception of him might even look different. Like, it might just be, okay, they're losing games with the backup quarterback. His starting quarterback's out, but now you can't.
He married himself to Dalton, and then Dalton imploded.
You can't use your starting quarterback is like something because you decided that guy wasn't worth the thing. And then, the other thing, he didn't need to tell him he was getting his job back either. You just didn't need to do that. You are the head coach of the football team. Like, you just made a decision. Hey, we're going to go with Andy, and that's fine. And look, I believe, though, that at the time he probably believed that Jameis was going to get his job back. When Andy came in, the whole thing was, no, he's the backup quarterback. And there was never any controversy or anything like that. So when Jameis goes down, he probably does believe that. But, like, you just don't need to say that. You just tell someone, all right, look, if you give up your hurt, your carries go to somebody else, or your throws go to somebody else, anything can happen. And that's football. I mean, that's just kind of the understood nature of the business. And it just didn't, I don't know. It just seemed like a self-inflicted wound there. That
I don't disagree with any of the decisions were made, just how they were presented.
Yeah.
Like, and it was time to switch to Dalton then. It was okay to stick with Dalton, but it just didn't need to be painted the way it was.
Yeah, especially with how this guy, whether you agree with the perception of everything or not, he's someone that I think people can clearly see feels like things have happened throughout his career that have been unfair to him. And that it's a consistent theme on it. So just know who you're managing. And, that's it. Just kind of do it in that manner, to a way that it's not going to blow back a little bit. And I just think that saying, hey, Jameis is hurt. This happened to he should have just said that day, hey, Jameis has this foot injury. Nobody knew about the foot injury. Just say, hey, Jameis has this foot injury. He's indefinitely injured, and Andy's going to be starting these games.
Yeah, let's go back and tell him how he should have done it. I mean, the even more obvious answer is you can marry the two together. You can be like, and luckily I like the way the offense is performed with Andy Dalton, so there's no rush to go back to Jameis Winston.
Yeah,
we're going to say that too.
We're going to let him take his time. Yeah, that's it. You can back Andy, and it just.
And meanwhile, the worst coaching decision of all, as it turns out, which was the most revealing thing from the Jameis Winston conversation, is it's insane that he started at Carolina and even got on that flight to London in the first place when we found out how bad he was injured. Now, look, Jameis fought to start against Tampa Bay. It meant a lot to him to face Tampa Bay, and he had just led them to a victory against Atlanta. And doctors said, well, it's a pain tolerance issue with the back. He's not risking more serious injury. So if he says he can go, he can go. So you let him go against Tampa Bay. But then he goes against Tampa Bay, underperforms, and suffers the foot injury. And they put him back out there against Carolina. That was insanity.
The other thing, too, is like reading the story. Why? Like it reads like there was like an agreement for him to step back. Someone just tell him. That's not, he's a worker. He's a worker. You tell him what his job is. You tell him when he punches the clock. That's it. Oh, man. What happens the last week of the season if CJ gets his leading 47th interception of the season against the Saints?
Oh, my God.
Man.
That's their last game. That's their second to last game.
Is it the second to last game?
They get Carolina at home.
Oh, that's right.
When Carolina will actively be tanking for a draft pick, and the Saints will actively be like desperate not to.
You know what I haven't thought about? Like, what if they get to that game against Philadelphia, and Philadelphia, there's 2 games left to play for.
Yeah.
But what if they have everything locked up by then and there's nothing left to play for, and like they just keep all their starters in to try to win to improve their draft position?
Yeah,
like
that'd be insane. Well, yeah, since it's week 17, Philadelphia will be playing their starters anyway. Teams don't usually take 2 weeks off and then have a bye.
They're far enough ahead, although they just lost last night due to the it was nice to watch the NFL officials in the primetime spotlight again. Oh man.
But no, look, I mean, the Philadelphia Eagles piece of this is just the absolute. I mean, this feels like the script of like Mighty Ducks 2 or something like that. And like Howie Roseman and the evil like Philadelphia Eagles are the bad guys in this. They're like that's the team they traded CJ Gardner-Johnson to, and he's leading the NFL in interceptions, and they have their first round draft pick next year, and they're the number 1 seed in the NFC. I can't believe
Well,
I can't believe the script.
if it was Mighty Ducks 2, Dennis Allen could just wash the pomade out of his hair and he'd go back to finding his way. But unfortunately, it's not going to be that easy for him. Look, I think maybe the worst thing that happened this whole offseason is that like Paulson Adebo had an outstanding training camp. Alante Taylor had a great training camp.
Justin Evans
had a great training camp. And I think that gave them the gusto to make an example out of CJ. And maybe if all those things hadn't happened, they wouldn't have felt so confident in their secondary depth. But look, I mean, like those guys played great the whole summer. And now Justin Evans is nowhere to be found. Adebo's kind of, just doesn't feel like he's taken that leap. I think Taylor's going to be legitimately great at some point. There's just some seasoning to go there, but that's one of the things that happened that I think just blew back on them so much is blowing back on them. I don't know. This is one that's never really going to go away. I still understand why they traded him, but then you just go back to it and say, well, maybe they should have just paid him, and then everything gets avoided. And maybe you just
they were never going to pay him though. They were never going to pay him.
But would you have rather paid him than one of the other safeties they brought in at this point?
But what I'm saying is the alternate scenario is that was never a consideration. So that, I mean, it's just like they were never going to pay Trey Hendrickson. I don't ever even list the Trey Hendrickson move as one of the like 10 bad personnel moves that that has happened over the last few years, because they were just never considering it. That was just one that it wasn't even like they were having a heated discussion. They just all agreed.
They did make him an offer, but it just wasn't rich enough. But like should they have paid? Should they have just opted a little bit more though? Like in hindsight, if you can go in a time machine, I mean, I think you redo that, and then the stuff that led to his exit doesn't happen, and you're in a, does it change the fate of the season? I don't know.
It might. I mean, it might. If they were like married to him and they thought he was going to be part of the heart and soul of this defense, I don't think they ever signed Tyrann Mathieu if they wanted to pay CJ though.
Yeah,
I don't.
And that's the okay. So which one would you have rather
Mathieu,
done?
You pay CJ instead.
Which one would you rather done though?
Well, because I don't know. I can't tell you. I mean, I can't tell you why they were down on CJ Gardner-Johnson. They were so convinced they did not want to invest in him. I mean, it's the same as all these teams that keep wanting to trade away Brandon Cooks. Like from the outside, we're like, why wouldn't you want that production on your team? But the Saints and the New England Patriots both decided they don't. Like, and the Rams too. Like all these great organizations decided they don't want to invest in Brandon Cooks. The Saints decided they didn't want to invest in CJ Gardner-Johnson. I've never heard anything so damning that makes me think, like, we all agreed they had to get rid of Junior Galette. I haven't heard any of the same stories with CJ Gardner-Johnson or anything.
We saw some stuff though.
But it was right. But that, like, I mean, we've seen fiery personalities that teams can live with, and it's very clear that that's just not a long-term investment they wanted to make. And it didn't surprise me that they didn't want to make that long-term investment. So I think it's tough to just look at production on the field and say they obviously should have paid him 4 years.
No.
I'm not saying I don't know.
I'm not saying. I'm just saying
that's the only way they could have gotten.
I'm saying with everything that we've seen and all the information we have now, if you could go back in a time machine, I think you obviously make a different decision. Like you would pay the younger.
This team
player.
would be better. Yeah,
you pay the younger player, and you figure out how to make it work with him, and you don't bring in the older guy, and CJ would be a building block of sorts for the future, but. Everything that happened in time as it played out made logical sense to and
it couldn't have backfired any worse.
Yeah. It's just bad luck. They got Caden Ellis, so
he was your player of the week.
He looked awesome. He did. He looked awesome. But look, I think the one thing is that he played harder than like everybody else. Like he was out there with something to prove, and it looked like it. And he made a lot of really good plays, and he looked great. We'll kind of see how that goes from there. But
that was Alante Taylor at Arizona, and Dennis Allen sort of used Alante Taylor as his, hey, everybody play like this. This is what Saints defense is supposed to look like or whatever. And so I guess now Caden Ellis is the, hey, everybody play like Caden Ellis or whatever. But it reminds me of that. You remember when Sean Payton, this was Sean Payton's darkest moment. Remember when he was pointing to that photo of the guys on the sideline? I remember like Hauli Kakaha was one of the guys. But I mean, he was grasping for straws at that time. All the veterans on the team had given up, even on Sean Payton. And he was like, I have hope because of all these, like, look at these undrafted guys and rookies and second-year guys who are into it while we're 5-8 on the sideline. And he like pointed to that photo, and they did turn things around back then. But that's what it feels like right now.
Yeah, see, going back to the rebuilding, what if you draft Kakaha and Stephon Anthony and like those are the picks that you're getting? Then it can be tough, man. It can be tough to try to rebuild your team through the draft. We'll see how they go about trying to do that, though. That's all we got for you guys this week. That's it for this podcast. We'll have all your coverage throughout the week. Keep it locked to NewOrleans.Football.